Hi guys, today I'm going to talk to you about modelling for Poser. There are some unique considerations for Poser that perhaps don't apply to other programs, and I'm talking particularly about the use of triangles, quads and ngons. So any surface in Poser, or indeed any 3D program, is made up of different elements, if you like. If you look here on this low poly monster model, you'll see here's the textured model on this side, but on this side you can see that there are discrete panels, if you like. In this case, quads here, triangle there, triangles here, mostly quads. And these panels are called polygons, and the point where they meet, that's vertices. So here's a scan data. This one's made up of triangles, or tries, it's shortened to, and a game ready asset here, a low poly asset. When you're modeling for games, you need to get the polygon count nice and low, because the more polygons that a model has, the more work the graphics card has to do to move them around. So you can imagine in a game such as World War Z or one of the first person shooter games where you could have dozens or even hundreds of characters on the screen at once, you don't really want to be shifting billions of polygons around, because it will slow the game down to an absolute crawl. So this character, for example, has quads here, then there's a triangle down there, so I'd call this a hybrid character. So first, a definition of terms then. So I'm just going to go into 3D Studio Max. So here's 3D Studio Max, and this is a compound object that I've created. I just created a simple cube, and then I took a cylinder and I did a Boolean operation to remove the cylinder from the cube, and it's created this shape where you've got, formerly we had a quad polygon here, quad polygon here, but as soon as I've removed it, it's created some interesting things. But before I do that, I'm just going to demonstrate some things to you. So I'm just going to go up to here and create here. Now it's called ngon, but in actual fact, depending on the number of sides, it will be whatever. So we'll start off with a triangle. So that shape there, it has 3 points, 1, 2, 3, and it's a triangle or tri. But if I increase the number of sides to 4, then it becomes a quad. Any number of sides above 4 is what's known as an ngon. So there's 7 sides, 8 sides, 9 sides, whatever number of sides then becomes an ngon. So any value of 5 or greater is an ngon. And it's really important. Let me just take that back down to 4, and then we'll make another one with 3. So now we have the two commonest basic elements, if you like, basic polygonal elements for modeling. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to convert this into an edit poly, put an edit poly modifier on it, and the same with this shape here, and put an edit poly. I could use a shortcut here, but it doesn't matter for this instance. And now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to show you the difference. So here, if I go into the vertex mode here, you'll see there are 3 vertices on the corner, 1, 2, 3, and if I grab one of those, no matter how I move any one vertex or any of the vertices, the polygon is always coplanar, so that means that basically there's just one plane and it behaves very well. It's completely predictable. So if you have sorry, when I say it's completely predictable, I mean the lighting when it's rendered. Now in games, it can be very important to understand how a model will be divided. In fact, in games in real time, even if you model with quads, and as you probably saw here, this asset is actually modeled with quads and triangles, but when it actually plays, these quads will be divided into triangles in the graphics engine and rendered as triangles anyway, because they're better behaved as as triangles than they are as squares, and they render quicker. Now, if I take this square here, or this quad, if you like, if I take one of the corners now, look here, no longer are all four vertices and the whole surface planar. So here, look, you've got one plane here, and then a different plane angle here. So that can cause problems, especially in Poser. That can cause problems. You'll get kind of facet distortion and weird lighting effects here. So when you model with quads, it's fine to model with quads. In fact, it's recommended almost every time. But when you model with quads, you just need to be careful to keep your vertices planar. Okay, so I'll just go back to here now. To return to this shape, okay, I'm going to delete those so that they don't distract us, or I'll hide them. There we go. Just hide them over here. Okay, so to return to this shape, this Boolean operation. So what we have here now, we have quads on the front, quads on the inside, but this shape on the top is an n-gon. Look, it has one side, two sides, three sides, four sides, plus each of these little shapes here is also a side. So if I were to export this, in actual fact, I'm using quite an old version of 3D Studio Max, and it doesn't export n-gons well at all, especially Boolean operations like this. So it wouldn't work anyway. But even if I could export this shape, when I import to Poser, I'm going to get facets arriving all over the place. If I export this here, export selected, and you'll see here when I do obj blah blah blah, doesn't matter what I call it, and you'll see here I've got an option here for the export mode. By default it's set up to quads. I could change that to triangles or polygons. Polygons is basically n-gons, but if I do polygons, the 3D Studio Max screws up the export anyway. But what I would want to do, if I were going to export this model for use in Poser, I definitely don't want any n-gons. So what I have here is the same model again, but this time I have what's known as a quadify modifier, and if I click on here, what it's done is it's divided this surface, see around the edge here, it's divided the entire surface into quads, and that looks like a triangle actually. I don't know why it's done that, but basically it's divided the mesh into shapes which are going to behave better in other applications. Now, this is a bit chaotic. You would want to tidy this up. It's nice and quick. There are some shapes where that would be a better solution than this, but this is still very messy, and you'd want to reduce the number of quads on the side to keep the polygons down. Polygon count is not quite so important in Poser as it is in games, but nevertheless you don't want to be wasteful of people's polygon count, or even your own if it's just a model for yourself, because more polygons equals more render power needed and slower. These few extras, a few thousand or whatever there is here, is not going to make that massive difference. But if you can imagine, if you had an asset such as a figure and you did this, it could generate a huge number of polygons. So what I'm going to do here now, I've got the same shape, but this time I manually quadified that surface, and you can imagine I did underneath as well to match. And so what I just did is I did a cut modifier from every single polygon to the edge, and I subdivided it so this is now much better behaved. Let me just quickly go to Poser and let me show you a really important asset of quads. So there was an argument a while ago, and I don't think it's going on anymore, that over whether you should have quads or tris, and even ngons. I think ngons are completely out the window now. Nobody models with them. It may be convenient to model with ngons because your 3D program will automatically generate them sometimes, but that convenience is superseded by the way they misbehave in other programs. So I think the only discussion now is whether it's quads or tris, and most people try and go quads. So what we have here is La Femme, and she's wearing clothes. That looks like she's got nipples there, but it's actually just control points. And she has billboard hair. Let me just show you that. There, she has billboard hair with a transparency map, and then this is the basic figure here. So if I go back to hidden line, so you don't get confused by the stuff in the background, you'll see the billboard hair is all modelled with quads. And the reason that quads are desirable is that any time that you want to start using morphs, quads behave better than triangles. And I'm just going to show you a situation where you wouldn't do that. This is a sculpture, and it's very common. I don't know if this is scanned. It could be a scan that's been cleaned up, or it could be manually created. It looks as if it's manually created because it's reflected across this axis, across this axis here. You can see exactly the same polygons on each side. So I suspect this has been modelled. But let me show you something that hasn't been manually modelled. Let me just go into props. Here's a model that I created, and it's a splash, a water splash. Unfortunately, the other stuff's kind of getting in the way. Let me just I'm going to open up on the other window a hierarchy so as I can hide La Femme and her clothes more easily without having to keep going into all the menus. So just you can see the splash kind of developing. There you go. So this splash is a classic situation where you might use triangles. What this is procedurally generated in RealFlow. RealFlow is a fluid simulator, and I generated this splash crown for a project, and with procedural stuff they almost always operate using triangles, and then you can quadify them later into quads if you need it, if you need them to behave well. But in a situation like this, I didn't need this shape to be animating. So what I wanted was a complex shape, but I needed no animation. Just the same with this sculpture. This sculpture is never going to animate. It's just going to stand there in a garden and look pretty, as it were. So here it's just going to stand there and be a background scene asset. In this particular case, it's a bit noisy, but it renders just fine, and it's only ever going to be a static crown. So triangles are a better solution there because the procedural RealFlow generator generated those. Let me show you something else that generates triangles. This is a default clothing item from Marvelous Designer. It's some kind of toga or dress or something, and by default it's created these triangles, which are just easier for the generation engine to output, and then there's an option to quadify again when you export. And the reason being that especially if you're creating clothing for Poser or for anything really where you're going to rig the clothing, that it's easier to work with clothing excuse me, easier to work with clothing if it's in quads. And let me give you an example here. Just imagine that this bottom of this dress, we're going to get some movement for wind. So we're going to have a row from here that we put control handles and kind of pull this dress outwards. Look, there's not a single straight line here. These triangles are going to create all kinds of weird facets. Whereas if you have a nice edge loop, let me show you an example of an edge loop here. Has he got an edge loop? Oh, here's a nice edge loop. So around the mouth here, we're going to animate this mouth. It's going to have morphs so it can open and shut. So it's got a clean loop of quads that go around the edge of the mouth. So basically, if you're going to be creating a figure that needs to animate or morph, then really it makes no sense at all to use triangles. Obviously, we've already discounted ngons, or shapes with 5 or more sides. They're kind of useless for anything. But for poser, we're not concerned about the resolution too much of the mesh, but we are concerned about the way that the mesh moves. And now let me just show you on this figure. So I'll just go back and bring. Here we go. So with the figures for movement in poser, they tend to be for rendering in poser. They're almost always quads that are figures that are going to be animated, that have the capacity to move parts, such as this arm, for example. If I grab this shoulder, thanks very much. I don't know why, but Poser's been crashing a lot recently. I'll be right back with you in a minute. I'm going to reload it. Okay, so I'm back. So I was talking about figures where you need to create motion. Anywhere you need to create motion, that's basically a morph. So here, for example, if I move her arm up and down, much better behaved with quads. Pretty much all poser figures, anything that can be morphed, has quads rather than tris. You'll also notice that the quad density is increased. We talked about edge loops, and you'll see. Okay, I really ought to just change the camera length here so as I can zoom in, but I'm not going to. So you'll see here you've got edge loops that go around the mouth here, edge loops that go around the nose here, and they basically enable you to not get nice clean animation. So then if I open her mouth, for example, okay, I'm afraid to do anything since it's crashed, but let me just mouth open. Here we go. And you'll see these, I'm pointing at the screen as if you can see my finger, for goodness sakes, what an idiot. Okay, you can see these edge loops here, around the edge, nice and clean. So it's a lot easier to make a clean, predictable mesh if you're using quads. So, to summarise, if you are going to be creating assets that don't need to animate, or you are creating procedural assets such as water simulations or point clouds, if you scan, if I go over to this scan over here, probably what's happened here is that a scanner, a 3D camera of some sort, generated a point cloud, which is well, exactly what it sounds like, really, a cloud of points in 3D space, and then the software converted that point cloud into tris here. If you're going to be creating static figures, then it's fine to use triangles. You can convert those to quads if you prefer, but it's actually a lower system requirement, a lower system burden if you stick with triangles. If you're going to be creating any kind of figure that needs to have movement, animation, morphs, anything like that, you're much better off to stick with quads. And in Poser, basically, if you try and import anything that has ngons, or that sides with polygons with 5 or more sides, you're going to get really unpredictable results. In fact, many pieces of software won't export ngons, they'll just turn them into triangles anyway. So hopefully you found that useful, guys. I will speak to you again soon.